Okay, let's see. We're going to do the first part for Volume 10. After that, it's going to have to be we're going to have to wait until May 15th, which is when the next book comes out. So until then, yeah. So be eager for May 15th. Prologue. The scale tipped and creaked under the weight of the herbs placed atop it. One scholar watched it settle through narrowed eyes before removing some of the herbs, while another set about chopping what remained with Messer. Detlende's older sister, Alstead, was stirring the pot they were brewing with. Oh, how dull this is. Detlende couldn't help but sigh. As part of her plan to obtain the Gruitschite, she was staying in a villa on the Royal Academy's grounds. She was waiting quite impatiently in its brewing room, watching her sister and retainers work. Her boredom aside, Detlende had known well in advance that it would take them many days to secure the Gruitschite. She had no qualms about the villa's bed and board. It was meant for princesses from Lonzanov, so the furniture and such were of the highest quality imaginable, and the rooms were outfitted with all the magic tools one would need to live comfortably. They had already brought chefs, servants, and provisions from the Lonzanov estate, but that wasn't all. Roblet, who had prepared the villa for them in the first place, had given them attendants and other supplies from its own home, meaning they even had servers tending to their needs. On the night of their arrival, or perhaps the following day, something unexpected must have occurred, for Roblet had ordered everyone to stay in the villa. Some voiced their worries and concerns, but Detlende was unfazed. Being stuck in the villa meant she could spend each day as she pleased. These really are tough times. Everyone expects so much from me. Funny thing is, she's never going to be able to do it anyway because she doesn't even have enough elements. She's not omni-elemental. She's going to have to be omni-elemental in order to even have a chance at getting the Gruitschite. So, yep, not going to happen. Detlende chuckled. The Lonzanovians had showered her with praise for teaching them to brew rejuvenation potions. They had watched longingly as she had ridden her high beast, and then listened intently while learning to create their own. It was thanks to her that they could now make themselves full sets of armor and produce their own mounts. Oh, God. Yes, her knights had technically taught them how to shape their armor, but the accomplishments of retainers belonged to their charge. The more she thought about it, the more favorable her circumstances seemed to be. Her jealous fiancé wasn't around to complain about her relationship with Leonzio, and there was no scholars demanding that she get back to work. It was paradise. Not that I've been wasting my time here. Each day brings me one step closer to becoming the Zent. Nobody can accuse me of resting too much. It had taken Robert 3 days to lay the groundwork necessary for them to leave the villa, without drawing attention to themselves. Leonzio and the Lonzanovians had gone to fetch their stapstones. Oh no, who did it? Who let them in? Someone from the royal family had to have let them in. So who did it? Was it Gervasio? Because he's from a branch royal family, so is it possible he was able to? Or was someone in the Royal Academy, the royal family itself? Oh no, was it, shoot, there's Anastasius, dang it, I'm running out of names! His older brother and his younger brother. I don't remember their names! Oh my God! Had gone to fetch their stapstones, and just a day ago, Detlende had circled the Academy shrines as part of the process to become the next Zent. Having to wait for Robert's permission to leave the villa was inconvenient, but there was no helping it, since they did not have the entire Sovereign Knight's Order on their side. But alas, not even Lord Robert was able to keep us hidden. Detlende had just finished clearing the last shrine, and was eager to take her next step toward the throne when Robert received a slew of ordinances announcing that there were intruders at the Royal Academy. She and the others had needed to retreat in the forest and make their way back to the villa, where they were to wait until the Order relaxed its search. Could the timing have been any worse? It wasn't the first time that Detlende had needed to wait in the villa, but that didn't make it any easier. Leonzio was stuck in his room, waiting for his staff to be absorbed, meaning she had no time to keep her. She had no one to keep her entertained. She had attempted to have a tea party with her elder sister to ease her growing boredom, but her sister had refused, since she had already agreed to brew with the scholars. He's always like this. Alstead was an honor student and a responsible young woman who always did exactly as their mother instructed. As commendable as that sounded, It meant she would outright ignore Detlinde until she was done carrying out whatever orders she had received. Does she not realize that my demands take precedent? I will soon be the Zend, whereas our mother will only be Ob Ehrenfest. Nope, your mother is dead in the ground. No, wait, no, never mind. She's not even dead in the ground. She's a freaking face stone now. Nonetheless, Alstead had cast aside the proposal of a tea party with her younger sister to make rejuvenation potions and magic tools for Lords Roblet and Gervasio. Detlinde was far from impressed. Mother isn't even here right now. Their mother had departed to obtain Ehrenfest's foundation. Detlinde had no idea why the woman was so obsessed with such a backwater duchy. I have to agree. She should have just, made it her mission to become Ob Ehrensbach, and then she could have proven to her mother and everybody else that she was able to run a duchy on her own. So she could have been Ob Ehrenfest back then, but no, because of that, she has to become Ob Ehrensbach, which is even better because it's a greater duchy. She could have gone that route, and all this could have possibly been avoided, or at least part of it could have been avoided. Actually, yeah, her death could have been avoided, but considering the whole Ferdinand thing, I think she probably still, actually no, I don't know if she would have died or not, but yeah, who knows what would have happened had she not gone down that path. But if obtaining what she desired would make her less unpleasant, all the better. Sister, that must be enough for now, Detlinde said, and rose from her seat. We would not want to miss dinner. Though she had come to the brewing room, she had not taken part. She had simply watched while one of the attendants worked on her nails. We have plenty of time, Alstead shot back. She made eye contact with the scholars, then returned her attention to the pot she was stirring. She really did value her brewing above a member of her own family. Detlinde turned away and pouted. Oh, but you can't go to the dining hall in your brewing clothes, can you? You will need to return to your room to change. Let us not drag this out. If you insist on continuing to brew, then please make extra rejuvenation potions for me. For you? We're making them for everyone. Alstead glanced at the scholars and said, Is that not correct? The scholars confirmed that they had made potions for Detlinde as well. No, Detlinde protested. I want extra rejuvenation potions. Twice as many as anyone else should do. Those are my scholars brewing with you, remember? Under normal circumstances, every single one of their potions would belong to me. The Lanzanavians are receiving some only as a result of my immense generosity. Oh, you are such a freaking big head. I hate that. Someone needs to knock her down a peg. Please. Somebody knock her down a peg. Rosemine, knock her down a peg at some point. Please. Preparing more for me should not be a problem at all. Her eyes tinged with concern, Alstead explaining that they would not be able to make those arrangements while they were following such a strict schedule. If you desire more potions, then you really should make them yourself. But we can prepare at least 2 more for you before dinner. Oh my, that simply will not do. Having to cleanse every shrine was more exhausting than I can describe. Yeah, right. To make matters worse, this is my only day of rest. I will need to resume work on obtaining the Grutachite tomorrow. No? As you are going to be staying here in the villa, it seems like the natural conclusion that you should make them for me. Though her feet weren't aching, she had relied on her high beast to take her from shrine to shrine. She had spent more time outside than she usually would. Spending her entire morning in bed had done wonders to refresh her, but that didn't mean she was in the mood to brew. She had never really cared for the task and all the tedious labor it required. Tomorrow, Alstead stopped stirring her pot. Do you have Lord Roblet's permission? Detlinde placed a hand on her cheek. Not yet, but I must obtain the Grutachite post-haste. And you wish to return home, no? I shall ask for your sake as well that will surely move him. She was the next Zent, so she saw no reason why he would refuse. I don't think you're going to be the next Zent. If anything, Roblet's trying to get Gervasio to be the next Zent. Lord Roblet has the entire Sovereign Knight's Order to oversee. Let us wait here for him. You were spotted while circling the shrines, were you not? If you go outside without permission, I suspect you will get caught. Caught? Detlinde cried, her eyebrows raised in outrage. I am this country's next queen. To think anyone will mistake me for one of these intruders, even for you, sister, this is unacceptable. Unacceptably rude. I suppose so, Alstead muttered. Detlinde sighed. How could anyone make such a basic mistake? There were times when she had to wonder whether the woman before her now really was her sister. Do be more careful going forward, Detlinde eventually said. In any case, were you not desperate to return home? If we were together as sisters and asked Lord Roblet for this one favor... Of course I want to return to Ehrensbach. Benedicta was to be worried about how I cannot talk. How Lord Blasius and what does that say? Blasius and I are faring. We cannot put Lord Robert at risk over a little discomfort. Mother told us to follow his instructions when it came to matters of the royal family and the sovereignty. Goodness, how dreadful. Even now, the most she can do is parrot Mother's orders. Benedicta was Detlende's niece. Any decent mother in this situation would want to rush home to her daughter. But Alstead was prioritizing Georgine's instructions. It was unfortunate, really. They could easily have resolved the situation by emphasizing the importance of obtaining the Grutashite or asking Gervasio to order Robert to let them proceed. Sister, you are always so obsessed with what Mother thinks. That reminds me, has she responded to our letter yet? She should have arrived at Ehrenfest yesterday or earlier today. She's gone! Bye-bye! I can't wait for y'all to find this out! Yeah, Ahrensbach is not y'all's home anymore. Detlende has sent out an update as soon as they arrived at the villa. In response, Georgine had ordered her not to send another for the next 5 days as she was going to be busy sneaking into Ehrenfest. Alstead considered it a fair enough request. A poorly timed message would reveal where their mother was hiding. True. But Detlende could not help feeling slighted. It did not help that she was not even her older sister emphasized with her frustration. Have faith, sister. She must be dying Ehrenfest's foundation as we speak, Detlende said. Then she sighed again. I am trying so hard to cement Mother's position as the next of Ehrenfest, but she has forbidden me from contacting her, and Lord Robert would not allow us to leave. Once again, Detlende's complaints were directed at Robert. Only by obtaining the Grutashite would she earn her mother's pride. Yet the world was insistent on getting in her way. It was dreadful. Lord Robert is very busy right now, Alstead replied in the same tone one would take with a child. He must attend to both the villa and the Knight's Order, all while dealing with the royal family. Goodness me, that much is obvious. Is it? Alstead asked with a smile. You should know, then, that we must wait for him to contact us. Brewing the divination potions is an important job. In case you weren't aware, the Lanzanavians should almost be done absorbing their staffs, and they will need quite a lot of tutoring to get used to them. Something clicked in Detlende's mind. Considering how long it had taken her to absorb her own staff, Leonzio would surely be finished soon. Likely by dinner or breakfast the next morning. As bored as she was, the fun times were about to return. Here you are, Alstead said, your share of the rejuvenation potions. She must have been brewing them during the conversation, and the sight did wonders to raise Detlende's spirit. Though she refused to have tea with me, I shall forgive her. The circumstances have been tough on her as well. Perhaps 2 days ago, Alstead had completed the duties assigned to her and attempted to return to Ahrensbach, only to find that the door to the Lanzenov estate would not open. Ha-ha! That's what you get! That's what you get for trying to plot a coup d'etat! It was like somebody locked it, she had said. Having no other choice, she had tried to return to the Ahrensbach dormitory, but it too had proven entirely inaccessible. Ha-ha-ha! That's what you get. She had asked Robert to look into the matter, whereupon she had learned that someone had stolen their daddy's foundation! Ha-ha! Yes! Ha-ha! That was the most the sovereignty knew, so they had yet to identify the thief or receive any updates on the current state of Ahrensbach. Ordinances could not cross duchy borders, so Detlende had sent a magic letter home in an attempt to get to the bottom of the situation. Their foundation might have been stolen, but her allies in the castle would send an explanation in short order. Or if the culprit intercepted the letter, Detlende had assumed they would fear her status as an exempt and immediately back away. Contrary to those expectations, Detlende had yet to hear from anyone, friend or foe. It was annoying. She wasn't particularly fond of people ignoring her, but at the same time it also motivated her to obtain the Grutashite no matter what. Stay strong, Detlende said. We need only endure until the day I take the throne. Ha, indeed, Alstead replied with a thin smile. In any case, this seems a more appropriate time for us to leave. Detlende had wanted more praise, but she was far from surprised. Her sister had always been emotionally unavailable. Not once had she squealed or jumped with joy over Detlende's various achievements. Well, I mean, what achievements are you even talking about, girl? Leaving to clean up to her scholars, Detlende returned to her room with her other retainers and Alstead. The attendants opened the door for them, and they started down the raised corridor looking into the main building. No matter how many times she saw it, Detlende was taken aback by the villa's strange architecture. A normal villa would comprise a large main building for the lord or lady of the house, a side building for baptized children, more side buildings for the second and third wives, and a training area for the knights. This one, however, consisted of a main building and only a single side building. Though its strange design ended up convenient for me, on the day of their arrival, Roblo had proposed that they all stay together in the side building, but it was unthinkable for an unmarried man and woman in love with one another to sleep under the same roof. Oh, y'all are extra conservative. What am I saying? Of course they are! Heeding a passionate explanation from Detlinde, Gervasio had said those from Arensbach could instead use the main building. That building was for Lanzanov's princesses, he had said. I do not mind if you would all prefer to stay there. I will stay here, however, in the room where I was raised. In truth, Detlinde had wanted to stay in the side building. It contained the teleportation circle to the Lanzanov estate, the brewing room and materials, food and servants, and the dining hall. A thought of needing to move to the main building anytime she wanted to sleep or change sounded painfully inconvenient, so she had asked the Lanzanovians to stay in the main building instead, but Gervasio had refused to budge on the matter. Haha. The main building is for women, he had continued, not a trace of warmth in his voice. If you insist on our separation, then I must ask you to sleep there. The only alternative is that you stay in the side building with the rest of us as per the original plan. Those who wish to sleep elsewhere may do so. Nobody else takes issue with the arrangement. Gervasio had then taken his attendants to his room. The certainty with which he had navigated the villa was evidence enough that he had once lived there. Well, duh. Now, a single person had agreed that Detlinde should get to stay in the side building. Roblo had told her to make up her mind while he gave them all a tour, then led them through the dining hall, the brewing room, and the internal training room. She had not stood a chance against the previous occupants of a villa she had never seen before, so she reluctantly agreed to stay in the main building. Had it been any smaller or less glamorous, she would most likely have continued to protest. To think everyone would simply ignore the problem of unwed men and women sleeping in such close quarters. Detlinde was still seething about Gervasio when the end of the corridor came into view, as an attendant opened the door ahead. One moment, Lady Detlinde. Lady Alceta will now open the next door. To enter the main building from the raised corridor, one first had to pass through a locked door and a small room. It was most unusual. Such passages usually led into the second corridor or an entrance hall with stairs. Stranger still, the villa's main building did not have windows on the side of the connecting corridor, so anyone who spent their entire life outside or inside would not even know it existed. I wonder why there are so many doors for a simple raised corridor, Detlinde mused. It must have been terribly inconvenient for those living here on a day-to-day basis. Perhaps they wished to hide it from someone? Goodness, what an amusing idea, Alceta remarked with a chuckle. From whom would they be hiding it, and why? The group headed upstairs to the third floor, which contained 3 large rooms said to have belonged to the Lanzanov princesses. The first had a Corelli as its emblem, the second a Shentis, and the third a Lawailer. The doors and windows were decorated with elaborate lattice work, and the furniture was so beautiful that one could easily tell it was meant for royalty. Detlinde, Alsted, and Blasius were currently staying in the 3 rooms. Blasius was displeased with the feminine decor, but not Detlinde. She was actually quite satisfied. There were chambers for retainers connected to their rooms, but any men in their service were staying on the floor below. Let us change and then go to dinner, Alsted said. She went to the Corelli room, while Detlinde entered its Lawailer counterpart. Once the trio were changed, they returned to the side building and made their way into the dining hall. The head count had increased since lunch, and even Leonzio had made his return. He appeared to be enjoying one of many lively conversations. Oh, Lord Leonzio, I see you absorbed your stab. Lady Detlinde, only 2 days have passed, yet it feels like an eternity since I last saw you. Goodness, were you really that eager to see me? Detlinde's cheeks were bright red in response to the obvious compliment. Leonzio must have spent the entire 2 days thinking about her. Yeah, right, I think he's just saying that just to stay on your good side. I would be positively delighted if you would arrange for me to start learning to use my stab tomorrow. My mastery of such a powerful tool would surely be of great use to you. Indeed, rest assured, lest for you shall be tutored by none other than Jurgen Smith's next Zen. Oh God. Lanzanovians tended to have exceptional mana capacities, for they would make for lethal combatants once they knew how to wield their stabs. There wasn't enough time for them to cover everything on the Royal Academy's curriculum, but the fundamentals of combat wouldn't take very long at all. Detlinde was convinced that even she could teach absolute beginners, and the thought of being showered with so much praise as when she taught the Lanzanovians to create high beasts made her feel giddy with delight. Incidentally, Giordano, a Lanzanovian envoy who normally stood behind and attended to Leonzio, looked around the dining hall. I do not see King Gervasio here. Delenny was inspired to look around as well. As the man's bewilderment implied, it was rare for Gervasio to be absent, especially when he fancied himself the lord of the villa. "He is not here tonight," Robot's head attendant interjected. "He has asked that we eat without him." Robot's head attendant was staying in the villa rather than his usual estate. His most important duty was maintaining a line of communication with his lord. It was common for nobles working in the castle to tell their head attendant when they intended to return home and when to prepare meals. Robot was exploiting to send orders and updates on the palace by ordinands. The head attendant's duty was to convey his charge's will to those in the villa and then return any information of considerable importance. "King Gervasio circled the shrines with me just yesterday," Lunde said. "He served as a decoy for me during my retreat. Perhaps he is still weary from that?" Gervasio had gone to the library with Robot to draw the attention of the Sovereign Knight's Order away from Detlinde. "Yeah, you were the decoy, not him." She considered it only natural that her safety as an exent should come first, but she still appreciated the heavy burden that he had chosen to bear. His absence was accepted with great magnanimity. Magnanimity. "Might I ask you all to take your seats?" an attendant said. Once everyone was seated, the attendants began serving food. It was a peaceful meal spent discussing the order in which they would cover the use of staffs. "Before you could even attempt anything else," Alstead began, "you must have a set form for your staff that you can maintain for a long time. It is best to make a simple staff without any excessive decorations," Detlinde added. As examples, you might want yours to be, it will only make it harder to maintain. Or as complex as you might want yours to be, it will only make it harder to maintain. "My, was that something one of your professors said to you?" Now, sister, whenever would you get such an idea? I'm just speaking common sense." "Yeah, it is from what the professor said." Even after dinner, the Lonzanavians were eager to learn how to use their staffs. By the time 7th bell indicated it was time for bed, they had come up with set forms and even managed to shoot mana from them. "Now that you know how to make your staffs, the next step is to learn the spells necessary to transform them into weapons and tools," Blasius explained. "It shouldn't take very long at all. By forming high beasts and making armor, you've already demonstrated that you can control your mana." Detlinde looked over the Lonzanavians, who were still thirsting for knowledge, and made her staff with a broad smile. "To give you an example, Messer." "Messer is commonly used when brewing and gathering materials," Blasius explained. The Lonzanavians listened intently and voiced their approval of the outstanding demonstration. Detlinde had spent her entire day agonizingly bored. But now she was overcome with the joy of having obtained what she truly desired, and tomorrow is going to be even better. Unfortunately for Detlinde, the dull yet peaceful tranquility of the villa was torn apart that very same night. Never again would she awake happy. Wow, that's kind of dark. I'm guessing it's indicating that either she's going to not be alive for much longer, or she's going to be, captured and used as a prisoner, essentially. So I'm guessing that's possibly going to be it. The Royal Academy at night. Kerslessel. Air stared. Once the shivering lights and the floating sensation were gone, I slowly opened my eyes. I'd cast the same spell I'd always used to teleport between country gates, but my surroundings weren't at all what I expected. There was no movable roofs or stairs. We were in an empty room with fully white walls and a single door. It reminded me a little of the teleportation halls that connected duchies and their dormitories. Only the outer edge of the circle and the door glowed with the same faint rainbow light as the country gates. The glow made me wonder whether the door in front of us could only be opened with the Grudgeschite. It appeared to be made of wood, so maybe a simple key would suffice, though I couldn't tell at a glance. How strange. The same spell took us to an entirely new location, Lenore mused aloud, seeming as curious as I was. Matthias nodded in agreement. Then he turned to me and asked, "Is this truly the Royal Academy?" I didn't have an answer for him. This was my first time coming here as well. I could guess we were somewhere on the Academy's grounds, but that was all. Well, let's investigate. There was a chance that our current whereabouts would impact our plans moving forward. I used the Book of Messinora to find our exact location and discovered we were at the Royal Academy's central building. We are further back than where we usually went for the Archduke candidate course, in an area that students were forbidden from entering. Ferdinand might know where we are. I turned to ask him, only to remember that he wasn't with us. He was still in Ahrensbach with the rest of the knights. I should teleport our remaining knights, I said. Please step off the magic circle and wait. Do not attempt to leave the room to investigate, and do not cause any fuss. I entrusted Cornelius with watching over everyone, then returned to Ferdinand with my other guard knights. Kerschlussel, Ahrensbach. Once we were back in Aaronsbach, I told the remaining knights to line up on the teleportation circle. Then I whispered to Ferdinand, the magic circle leads to a room in the Royal Academy, unlike any of the gates. Do you know its location? Should we alter our plans? No, there's no need. I teleported there before under certain circumstances. Oh, what are those certain circumstances? I want to know. But that does not matter right now. The knights appear to be ready. I wonder what circumstances will require someone to use a teleportation hall in a forbidden section of the Royal Academy. That's what I want to know. Ferdinand's past was as incomprehensible as always. I couldn't even imagine what he must have gone through as a child and a student. I wasn't going to complain, though. His experience had gotten me out of so many scrapes. Relieved that there was no need to change our plans, I stood on the teleportation circle and said, Kerstrussel, Erstared. We arrive at the academy in the blink of an eye, at which point Ferdinand cast his eyes over the knights. Do we have Verbergen's seals? The scholars had rushed to make concealment charms at Lenore's recommendation. The ones given to the knights used faith stones, but mine was a magic circle drawn on fey paper. Let us head outside as quickly as we can, Ferdinand said. The last thing we want is to face more instant death poison while we are in such close quarters. That much was true. The knights had fought in the Purge of Londonov and the Battle of Gerlach before coming here. Though they were using cloth to cover their mouths, many of them didn't have much to read left. Do not speak until we are outside, Ferdinand continued. Rosamund, is everything ready? At his signal, I pressed my book at the Messenora against the door, which began to open with a low creak that echoed throughout the midnight Royal Academy. An eerie silence followed, and tension filled the air. Our immediate surroundings weren't too dark thanks to the glow of the teleportation circle, but given the late hour, everything outside the room was pitch black. The darkness was so thick it almost felt like it was seeping through the cracks in the opening door. Ferdinand gestured ahead of us with a firm chop of his hand, spurring Eckert and Angelica to silently leave our front line and step into the hallway. Their armor stood out a little in the darkness. I enhanced my eyesight and stared intently at their backs while praying that we wouldn't cross paths with the Sovereign Knight's Order. Once he'd taken a quick look around, Eckert raised a hand indicating that there weren't any knights nearby. Angelica pressed onward in response until she reached the turn, then she shook her head, signaling that there were people around the corner, and returned to us. This hallway contained the teleportation doors for all the villas and dormitories. Of course, there were sovereign guards here. Is the conference building clear? Ferdinand muttered. Eckert had already started advancing down the hallway. He confirmed that our second option was clear of any knights, then beckoned to Justice and quietly spoke his name. The attendant scholar approached one of the windows, intent on unlocking it. A moment passed, and Eckert waved again. Go in order and move without a sound, Ferdinand instructed. At once the knights filtered out of the room. I was watching them go. One of my duties was to close the door again, so I needed to be the last person to leave. When Ferdinand suddenly whispered to me, if you wish to take your knights and return to Aaronsbach, now is your chance. What? No! No, she's not leaving! She's not going to let you do this alone. Hell no! I glared at him, unable to believe my ears. After everything we'd endured, did he really expect me to turn around and leave? Yeah, this is not... Rosamund would not do that. She'd keep going. Dunkelberger had asked me to use the Gruterscheid to justify our being here. My complicated relationship with Facestones meant I was even more of a burden than usual, but I could at least keep Ferdinand from having to expose his book of Messenora. I eyed the teleportation circle, then shook my head and stepped out in the hallway. Ferdinand reluctantly came with me. Only once the door was locked did we regroup with the knights. The familiar carpet beneath my feet told me we really were inside the Royal Academy's central building. This was where one obtained the Book of Messenora, where one could access the country gate and a teleportation circle. Though it had taken me this long to realize it, the truth was clear to me now. This really was Jurgen Smith's Holy Land. Nobody spoke. We simply advanced through the ivory buildings, lit only by reflected moonlight. The thrill of sneaking through a school put all sorts of strange ideas in my head, like skeletons leaping out of a science classroom. My limbs were trembling in anticipation of whatever was to come, and the silence made me want to cry out. I watched as the knights climbed through the single open window one by one and vanished into the forest on their high beasts. Do you seriously intend to come along? Ferdinand asked. Would I be here otherwise? Then I must ask you not to scream. Before I could utter another word, Ferdinand picked me up and jumped out the window. Of course he did! Because, you can't use your high beast, so you can't even form it right now, so he's going to have to help you with that. I nearly did scream, but clapped a hand on my mouth at the nick of time. Ferdinand, in contrast, didn't seem the slightest bit bothered as we plummeted toward the ground. He briskly formed his high beast, set me on front of him, and then flew off. The knights who had disappeared among the trees came out again to follow us. I can't believe knights do this like it's nothing. They're amazing. Rosamund, Ferdinand said, contact Dunkelfelder. If all was going as planned, then Dunkelfelder's knights would already be stationed in the dormitory. We had been told to contact them after using the teleporter. Right. I took out some fey paper Hartman had marked with an Ordoshinelli magic circle and spoke into it. Obdumfelger, this is Rosemine. We have left the central building. Considering where we just were, and the fact that I can see the library over there, my target must be... I used my stylus to write Dunkelfelger's common room on this as a destination of my letter, then folded the sheet into an airplane, then threw it toward the Dunkelfelger dormitory. Its ivory hue tore through the night sky like a shooting star. We were currently headed to the Ahrensbach dormitory. Dunkelfelger's knights would meet us there once they received word of our arrival. There wouldn't be anyone inside since the intruders were staying in the Adalgisa villa, and its location made it a much safer place to congregate than Dunkelfelger's dormitory of the central building. Together we would search for the Adalgisa villa, which was being kept hidden by Verbergen, the god of concealment. Are you really okay with going to the villa? I asked Ferdinand. If you think it might make you unwell, we can get someone else to lead the attack. Everything I'd heard about the villa told me it wasn't somewhere he wanted to return to, and it seemed unnecessarily cruel to make him relive what must have been deeply unpleasant memories. Ferdinand heaved a heavy sigh. You have pushed down your intense hatred of war to come here as an ob. Do you really expect me to run away? I would advise you not to fret about things that are best left unsaid, but I will say this. I relish the opportunity to tear that villa to pieces. Hold it right there! What's gotten into you lately? You keep saying all these violent and outlandish things, like when you proposed turning Ahrensbach into a playground and expressed your disdain that the Royals and the Lanznavians hadn't wiped each other out. He hadn't rested much since his rescue, so maybe his exhaustion was getting to him? Wait, what? My thoughts have always been violent. What? Oh, he never said anything, essentially. Ferdinand said with a wry smile. I simply never went out of my way to voice them. You can rest assured that this is anything but a recent development. How is that supposed to reassure me? Then believe whatever puts your mind at ease. Are you seriously acting like this doesn't concern you? These are your thoughts! Ferdinand was far more violent than I had previously assumed. Yeah, I have to agree. Rather than avoid the Adalgisa villa out of discomfort, he wanted to utterly destroy it. I mean, considering what had happened to him during that time, I can understand him wanting to get rid of it completely. His stony expression when speaking about Gervasio had worried me, but I could see that he was fully resolved to face his past. Speaking of which, I said, do you know where the villa might be? On the map, it was below and to the right of the Ahrensbach dormitory, but it's so dark out that even the dormitory seems invisible. By looking at the central and specialty buildings, I managed to get a rough idea of where we were, but my surroundings were a mess of darkness, interrupted only by the dull shadows of the dormitories and the glowing cylinders that marked their gathering spots. I couldn't even tell if we were headed in the general direction of the Ahrensbach dormitory. If you fail to understand the map so spectacularly that even the Ahrensbach dormitory is too hard to find, then why did you assure Dunkelfelger that you knew where the villa was? Because I do, at least to some degree. I've just realized that the map and the territory aren't one and the same, so I'm having trouble getting my bearings. It was down and to the right on the map, so we should go southeast, right? Do you even know where southeast is? How could you be in such a sorry state when you wheeled the Grudershite and decided to lead this excursion? Ferdinand wasn't impressed with my map reading skills, but that wasn't an issue. Not when I could thrust the task onto someone else. I do not need to know where southeast is when you are here to tell me. You located the Real Academy shrines when investigating its 20 mysteries, did you not? The details were in Professor Herscher's documents. You could tell me their location even without a Grudershite. I must have won our little debate because Ferdinand grimaced and told me to face forward. I did as instructed with a victorious grin, and that was when I noticed the magic circle in the sky above. Even at night, it was easy to see. The Ahrensbach dormitory had at some point appeared in the distance. I could tell it was Ahrensbach's because Dunkelfelger's knights had taken up the space above it. They extended such an immense amount of pressure that even birds and small animals in the forest retreated in fear of what they must have assumed to be mana-rich predators. I suppose it was unreasonable of us to expect some discretion, Ferdinand muttered. Well, we are using Verbergen's seal. I suppose it wouldn't be fair to compare them to us. Not to mention their loudmouthed, imposing by nature. I tried to cover the slip of my tongue with an innocent laugh, but it was an awkward attempt at best. I was relieved then when an ordonnance arrived to spare me any further embarrassment. It landed on my arm and spoke. Lady Rosemine, this is Dunkelfelger. We have arrived above the Ahrensbach dormitory. Where are your knights? The ordonnance was partly through its second repetition when Ferdinand grabbed it and told me to look away. He sent a response while I stared into the distance. This is Ferdinand. We are using Verbergen's seal, which has made us invisible to you, but we could see your forces. We shall rendezvous with you shortly. I watched the ivory bird soar through the night sky to deliver its message. Barely a moment later, our allies started to circle the dormitory. Were they searching for us? They're kind of like bees. Indeed, rather than simply waiting for us, they were swarming like bees, desperate to inform their brothers of an especially lovely flower. Why'd you have to voice it like that? I see. Hyshitz is not the only one incapable of remaining still, Ferdinand remarked, clearly exasperated. Is this just part of their culture? Now that they are drawing so much attention to themselves, our attempts to be stealthy even seem like a rather pointless endeavor. We had warned Verberg against Seal so that we wouldn't need to fight the Sovereign Knights in the central building. Now that we were outside, however, it made sense to remove them. We didn't want to risk Dunkelfelger hitting us by mistake. Ferdinand stopped using his seal and then took his high beast ahead of our front line. Troops, remove your Verbergen seals, he ordered. Everyone did as they were told, and our allies roared in excitement when they saw us appear out in thin air. They were right under our noses, one cried. I would never have noticed them. Lord Ferdinand, where is the villa? Another asked. Let us hurry there at once. Hyshitz, Ferdinand replied. Why are you here? I see you came with more troops than we agreed upon. I was sure I'd recognize one of the voices, and now I knew why. Hyshitz had decided to join the fray. So much for my assumption that he would sit this one out after fighting in Ahrensbuck and Gerlach. Maybe he had taken no for an answer? You should know Dunkelfelger by now, girl. Anybody like that is not going to turn down a fight. Lady Rosebud, if you would guide us to the villa, said Ob Dunkelfelger. As it turned out, he was leading his duchy's troops. I went to greet him, but he raised a hand to stop me. Traditional greetings are not necessary on the battlefield. I must ask that we make haste. The Ob's voice was bright and, yeah, he wasn't even trying to hide his excitement. I turned to Ferdinand, convinced that one of us needed to say something to curb our allies' enthusiasm. Otherwise, they would descend upon the villa the moment it came into view. Ferdinand met my eye and took the matter into his own hands. We will now move to the villa's location and use magic circles of Anholtung, the goddess of advice, to expose Verbergen's concealment. Only once we have checked whether the villa's barrier is active will we infiltrate it, attempt to capture as many of the traitors as possible. Ahrensbach's mana burden moving forward would depend on the number of criminals who survived this encounter. In other words, we needed those traitors to be held responsible for their crimes and imprisoned so that we could rinse them for all they were worth. That's what I'm saying, yeah. To elaborate, Ferdinand continued, we know that Detlende, Alsted, and Leonzio are there, orchestrators of this plot. Do not kill them unless it is absolutely necessary. Moreover, as they have antidotes and ways to counter instant death poison, we should expect them to use it without hesitation. Are you prepared to deal with this? Of course, Ob Dunkelfelger replied. We use the intelligence from Hyshit's sortie to make sure we're ready. Now, allow me to share what we know of the enemy. Detlende and her entourage comprised roughly 10 people, whereas Alsted and her husband brought only their attendants. There were 12 Londinavian envoys who greeted me, 8 of which wore face stone rings. Those figures do not account for Gervasio, the king of Londonov. The king's presence meant we could expect any number of retainers. That much was true in both Londonov and Jurgensmith. Leonzio was a Londinavian royal as well. Ferdinand explained and would therefore be acting with several servants of his own. We had no idea how many Londinavians had come to Jurgensmith on Gervasio's ship and relocated to the villa. Ferdinand had been poisoned at the time and Letizia had been imprisoned. As it stands, we do not know precisely how many Londinavians are in the villa, but we know what to expect. Ahrensbach's former archducal family with their retainers, and Londonav's royal family with theirs. There is a good chance they will be strong enough to escape bands of light made by the majority of our knights. What are the opponents then? Excellent! Ob Dunkelfelger boomed. He sounded very satisfied with this development, but I didn't want to fight anyone powerful. In an ideal world, we would apprehend the intruders and then immediately tie them up. Rosemine, form your Bruderschei and make a show of pointing it over there, Ferdinand whispered from behind me. I shouted Bruderschei and pointed my shining book of Messinora in the indicated direction. I wasn't sure how, but Ferdinand must have decided that was southeast. The villa we seek is this way, I announced. Let us go. Ah! The knights roared, sounding especially eager as Ferdinand took the lead. The Adalgisa villa. Ferdinand glanced around atop his high beast, then slowed to a stop. We were above an expanse of trees as dark and empty as the rest. We have reached its rough location. Rosamund, use the I know, you can count on me. I pulled out the sheet marked with Anholtung's magic circle that Hartman and Clarissa had made for me, then formed my staff and poured mana into it. O Anholtung, the goddess of advice, subordinate to the goddess of life. Goddess of life? Wait, what? Don't you mean the god of life? No! Ava Grave's not a girl! Girl! You know this! Reveal what has been hidden by Verbergen, the god of concealment. Lights rose from the magic circle, brightening the forest around us, before concentrating on one spot in particular. An elegant ivory villa appeared among the trees. Its architecture stood out in comparison to the Airfest dormitory. The entire villa comprised 2 look-alike buildings and the raised corridor that connected them. I could also see remnants of a front garden, a fountain, a pond, and some flower beds, but they were all severely overgrown. I couldn't even begin to imagine how long had passed since they were last tended to. The villa must have been a sight to behold when it was in use. It was much more impressive than the dormitories, which was used only during the winter and the Archduke Conference. There was no reason to give them fountains or flower beds. Doing so would require nobles and servants to stay at the academy all year round to maintain them. So this is where Ferdinand grew up. For a bit. I shot a quick glance behind me. His eyes carried not a trace of nostalgia. Instead, he looked openly annoyed, like he really was ready to tear the place apart. So theirs is a villa here. That's where the foreigners are. The knights cried out in awe when they saw an entire villa appear out of nowhere. Dunkelfelder got straight to barking orders at them. Find out when are the barriers active. One of Dunkelfelder's knights, who was using a drivable high beast, to my surprise, tossed a shining blue something through his open window. What kind of high beast he had? What was it, I want to know. Come on, tell me. I watched it closely as it arced toward the ground and saw what appeared to be a glowing blue high beast with a glowing blue child atop it. Before I could even think about rubbing my eyes, it started circling around. It's moving on its own. Not on its own, with mana, Ferdinand explained. That appears to be a genuine piece, though its size is quite simply ridiculous. Gwenin, this was the board game where you move pieces with your mana. Oh, okay, real-life Gwenin. Okay. Memories of seeing the game using the game to help Angelica understand her written lessons for the night course came to mind. Then it suddenly occurred to me what I was looking at. Isn't that one of the decorative Gwenin pieces from Dunkelfelder's tea party room? It brings to mind one of the 20 mysteries of the Royal Academy. The Gwenin pieces that challenge people to dinner, I think. They are not just similar, they are one and the same. The event responsible for that legend happened not too long ago. I stared at him in surprise. Hannelore didn't know anything about it, though. How could she? It happened before she was a student, and everyone involved was sworn to silence. I have no further questions. No further questions? The blue Gwenin piece, which was about as large as a recently baptized child, flashed with white light before shooting toward the villa. It smacked through a window with a resounding crash. There's no barrier! Attack! Dunkelfelder roared. I will strike from above. High shit! Strike from below. Understood. The assault of the villa began with Dunkelfelder's charge. He must have thought it best to start with the closest point of entry, for he landed on a third-floor balcony, completely destroyed its sliding door, then rushed inside. His troops followed suit with equal enthusiasm, half smashed through windows on the same story as the Ob, while the others crashed through balconies on the floor below. Commanders shouldn't be rushing headlong into danger, should they? I asked. My impression of Oz was that they stood regally in the background when their troops fought for them, but that wasn't at all what I just witnessed. Considering it's Dunkelfelder, it makes sense, considering these guys are just addicted to fighting, essentially. It's in their blood, so of course they would go charging in. Why did he not leave anyone outside to watch the villa? Did he just assume we would do it? Ferdinand went over the grimace, then turned. Strahl, take the first squadron and investigate the Sovereign Knight's order. I wish to know why they have not reacted to any of the noise we have made. Yes, sir. We cannot allow Dunkelfelder to take all the glory, so let us strike the other building. 2nd through 7th Squadron, enter through the 2nd floor balcony. Focus your attack on the women's rooms on the 3rd floor. Gather your prisoners in the front garden. Yes, sir. 8th Squadron, watch over your prisoners. You are the only ones who will be able to recognize Leonzio of Lonzanov. Yes, sir. If the 2nd through 7th Squadrons were targeting the 3rd floor, why were they being ordered to breach the 2nd? I was about to ask, but then I realized that the 3rd floor didn't have any balconies. The windows had wonderful decorations of plants and animals, but each was covered with sturdy-looking bars. The two buildings are so similar, but this one doesn't have any balconies on its 3rd floor, I mused aloud. Why is that? Because of their intended residence, Ferdinand replied. Do you think new members of the royal branch family would live under the same roof as these destined never to be registered as Jurgensmith nobles? Ferdinand went on to explain that the side buildings had traditionally been overseen by the husband and wife of a branch family. The future king of Lonzanov would be registered as their child, so as would the girls be registered as Jurgensmith princesses. The Lonzanov princesses and their children, destined to become Facestones, would spend their entire lives in the other building. The bars were a strong indication that neither escape nor infiltration were permitted, and told me everything I needed to know about how those who lived there were treated. I suddenly understand your desire to reduce this villa to rubble. If only we could use your estate-destroying high beast to accelerate the process. I suspect that creature of yours would complete the job in the blink of an eye. I don't think she'd be able to make it that big. Would she? I spun around to look at Ferdinand, not best pleased about his teasing remark. Don't act like my lessee is a creature of untold destruction. The damage done to Gerlach's estate was the result of a series of very unfortunate coincidences, nothing more. My tormentor chuckled, and at that moment, our first prisoner was thrown out of a window, bound with light. This reminds me of when Matthias was flung out of the estate, Ferdinand muttered as he brought his high beast to the ground. Our retainers landed as well. Stay here, Rosamund, Ferdinand said. I will give further orders from within. Ferdinand, You will only be a burden on foot. Stay here with the others and watch the prisoners. If any of them escape their restraints, bind them anew. You have more honor than any of the knights. I was basically dead weight now that I couldn't make my high beast, but Ferdinand had still managed to find a job for me. He started giving instructions to my guard knights as well. Clarissa, instruct Uncle Fugger to bring the prisoners out here. At once. Knights, protect Rosamund. Do not let any harm come to her. Sir. Ferdinand and headed into the villa with Eckert and Justice. The relevant squadrons followed after them. I stood in the garden and watched them go. Clarissa sent out an ordinance. A short while later, some of Dunkelfugger's knights arrived with more prisoners, 3 in total, all tied up with light. They must not have expected an attack at this hour, as they were still wearing their night clothes. Even if the light of the magic circle and the Gwen Piece's loud entrance had alerted them to our presence, they wouldn't have had time to get changed. It would seem the building Dunkelfugger chose contains more people from Lanzenov than from Allensbach, one of the latter's duchy's knights observed while peering down at the newly arrived prisoners. All 3 of them were Lanzanovian envoys who had apparently been present when Leonzo had given his formal greeting. They looked up at us in complete silence, not even attempting to speak. Here come more of them, someone said, and pointed up to the sky. I gazed up at the prisoners being brought over just in time to see one of them tear apart the bands of light restraining him in an attempt to flee from Dunkelfugger's knights. He must have had more mana than whoever had caught him. That's Leonzio, one of the Arensbach knights said to me, next to me shouted, spurring 5 of the 8 squadron's 10 knights to fly up into the air to help with his recapture. Do not stand in my way, Leonzio roared. I will become the next king of Lanzanov. He made a high beast and immediately started brandishing a staff. Wait, what? Why does he have a staff? Leonzio is an envoy, not someone raised to be Lanzanov's next king, right? The Lanzanovians weren't given staffs. Only those registered as Jurgen Smith nobles could obtain them. That was why Lanzanov sent princesses to the Adolphus Sevilla in the first place, and why their next king came of age here in Jurgen Smith. I also knew that from Ferdinand, the last king to be raised in the villa was a man called Gervasio. He was old enough to have left for Lanzanov before Ferdinand was born, so I didn't have a clue what Leonzio was on about. Seriously, how on earth does he have a staff? We'd expected our foes to use instant death poison and silver equipment, not this. I couldn't help but frown at this unexpected development, at which point our 3 previously docile prisoners broke free from their own bonds and leaped to their feet. They had staffs as well, and they went to no time shooting mana from them as they raced straight toward us. They were employing the same attack that Count Bindewald had used against me in the temple. Rosemine, Cornelius barked, and once I turned my staff into a protective shield. Those attacks were a lot stronger than anything Count Bindewald had thrown at me, but I wasn't the least bit concerned. Compared to all the other attempts made on my life, these mana blobs were straightforward and easy to defend against, not to mention I was surrounded by knights. Lenore and Lorenz formed their own shields in short order. Angelica, Matthias, and Cornelius all sprung forward and swung their swords down, cleaving the mana blobs and scattering their remains. Well, that was no surprise. Way back when, I hadn't known the first thing about combat, and Daniel's mana capacity had paled in comparison to that of Count Bindewald. But even then, we managed to defend ourselves against his attacks. Only the most arrogant combatants would use balls of raw mana as a battle such as this. The insinuation that one's opponents would succumb to such a basic attack was well and truly insulting. But these guys know nothing! They know nothing about all this, so of course they would not know. As much as mana blobs could play a minor role in during ambushes, they were completely useless otherwise. No Jurgen Smith nobles would even consider using them. These Lanzanovians must not have known how to use their stats properly. The prisoners grimaced in frustration and attempted to attack again, but by that point, Angelica had already closed in on them with Stenlook. Her enhanced speed really was something. Make sure not to kill them, Lenore shouted admonishingly as she spread out her cape to block my vision. Her warning must have come too late, however, as what followed was an anxious cry from Angelica. Someone, come heal this person, quickly. Angelica, trade places with me, Cornelius replied. He had an aptitude for water, meaning he could cast healing spells to at least some degree. Lenore waited until her injured opponent had been tended to, then she put her cape down and allowed me to see again. Cornelius had used just enough healing to keep the prisoner alive before tying them up and pushing them in our direction. "Hartman, we need staff sealing bracelets on this one," he shouted. Hartman rushed over and did as instructed. That was one foe dealt with. The remaining two were shooting out huge blobs of mana and seemed to be more capable fighters, but they had no other attacks, and they weren't anywhere near as well trained as the knights. I didn't even have silver equipment or instant death poison to rely on, maybe because we'd taken them by surprise, or because Dunkelfelger had already disarmed them. It wasn't long before Matthias and Angelica took down the last of the prisoners. They broke our captive's legs to prevent another attempted escape, then bound them. "Clarissa, send an ordinance to Dunkelfelger," Lenore instructed. "Tell him our opponents have staffs, though I am sure they already know as much." I turned my attention to the building our allies' knights had disappeared into and glimpsed the dazzling flights of a mana battle through its blown-out windows. Even from outside, I was able to hear Ob Dunkelfelger's exhilarated roar. "Don't think your feeble shield will protect you from my attacks!" Oh yeah, y'all are gonna die. If y'all weren't supposed to be kept alive, y'all would die. Dunkelfelger's knights brought in us more and more prisoners. Lenore explained that those bound in flight had staffs and an abundance of mana, in stark contrast to the manaless Lonzanov troops who had ravaged Ahrensbach and would need to be watched even more carefully. In response, the knights shackled the new prisoners with staff-sealing bracelets, broke their legs, and then tied them up with rope. Lenore kept her shield raised and watched with narrowed eyes as our crippled opponents groaned in pain. They clearly have some training. They bided their time while pretending to be captured, then acted in unison the moment our forces were divided. So why were they fighting so ineptly? They had enough mana to break the knight's bindings. They could have done so much more. I gazed upon the man who had shouted about becoming the next king of Lonzanov. Leonzio, was it? Like his peers, he was fighting us in his nightwear. His hair still a disheveled mess. Well, it was generous to call it fighting. He was continuously attempting to run away while our knights blocked his every means of escape. Leonzio's approach seemed no better than his allies. He was shooting raw mana from his staff while attempting to flee on his high beast. He moved fast, likely a reflection of his immense mana capacity. But escaping an encirclement of 7 knights wouldn't be easy. Even from a distance, I could see that it was only a matter of time. He would surely be captured soon. "Perhaps they are simply inexperienced," I said. "It can't have been too many days ago that they obtained their staffs." They had experience using high beast and could shoot mana, but transforming their staffs into weapons and using rot were still too much for them. In a sense, they were like me before I'd started attending the Royal Academy. Back then, I'd practiced using my high beast to gather materials and shot mana from my ring or granted prayers, but I'd not used a staff before my classes. "So they obtained their staffs just recently?" Lenore asked. "Indeed, assuming they really are in cahoots with the Sovereign Knight's order, they should have requested aid the moment we launched our attack. There's no other explanation for why they haven't used rot, the first spell one learns at the Royal Academy." Lenore nodded, convinced. Lorenz kept his shield raised and the stern look on his face as he slipped into our conversation. If this guy wants to be the king of Lonzanov, then whatever. Power to him. Why is he here in Jurgenschmidt and at the Royal Academy of all places? I don't see why Lonzanovians would want staffs, the symbols of our country's nobles. "Maybe obtaining a staff is necessary to become Lonzanov's king," Lenore mused aloud. Likewise confused, but plenty of our foes now have them. Could there really be so many claimants to the throne? I don't think so. I think it's just like a thirst for knowledge and power, essentially. We don't know enough about Lonzanov to draw any reliable conclusions. Foreign politics and the Indulgence of Villa weren't part of the Royal Academy's curriculum, and our only reason for being here was to capture the Lonzanovians who had abetted Ahrensbach's previous archducal family's treason. I certainly hadn't told my retainers what I already knew about the Indulgence of Villa. Rather than continue to speculate, we should just ask the prisoners, I said, then pointed at Leonzio, who had now been caught through the combined efforts of Dunkelfelger's and Ahrensbach's knights. Barely a moment later, a tremendous explosion resounded from the 3rd floor of the building. Ferdinand and the others had entered. I recoiled, and tension spread through us all as we turned to see the cause of the commotion. Every single window had shattered, showering the ivory footway below with chunks of glass that practically disintegrated on impact. "Lord Ferdinand, what is the meaning of this?" came Detlinde's shrill cry. She was so loud that not even all the noise could drown her out. I'd secretly hoped that someone else would capture Detlinde. Ferdinand was stuck in such a violent mindset that I worried she might not survive an encounter with him. However, my concern for her vanished when she continued to speak. "You may be so desperate for my love that you escaped the jaws of death to find me, but nonetheless, barging into a lady's room in the dead of night is unthinkably boorish and I'm guessing she was going to say crude." Detlinde's furious, hysterical cries were abruptly cut short. Someone had decided to silence her. That much was uncomfortably obvious. "She took that tub with Ferdinand," Cornelius muttered. "I hope Ecker didn't just go berserk." He was worried that his brother might violate our command not to kill any of the orchestrators, and it was easy to see why. Delinda had made those insulting remarks to the very man she'd poisoned. Had it been me up there with them, not Eckert, I would probably have gone berserk. Yeah! Ferdinand would have intervened, I said, and even if not, he knows how to cast healing spells. Lady Detlinde must be alive. I sincerely doubted that Ferdinand would allow anyone to counter-evade an order he had given. His excessively logical approach to everything did wonders to put me at ease. Ahrensbach's knights soon arrived with a fresh batch of prisoners. Justice was dragging along an unconscious Detlinde wrapped in bands of light. Her nightwear was covered in dirt, and mud clung to her gorgeous blonde tresses. It was scandalous for an adult woman to have her hair down in public. She would probably throw a fit when she woke up. Justice, she is alive, right? Eckert's blow only knocked her unconscious, he replied. As much as it pains me to say it, our future plans require that we keep her alive. Her head did strike a few rocks when I was bringing her here, but I see no reason to fret about it. She has nothing between her ears to begin with. Justice, you savage! Justice wore a broad smile, but his brown eyes contained nothing but hatred as he glared down at Detlinde. He wasn't even attempting to hide his disdain. And the same went for the knights who had arrived with him. That much was to be expected. Detlinde's foolish actions were the reason countless Ahrensbach nobles had died, and the entire duchy was now considered a land of traitors. Are the nobles here from Ahrensbach, I asked, as more and more prisoners arrived. It was a necessary question, as I couldn't distinguish the Lanznavians from the people of Ahrensbach. Yes, Lady Rosemine, one of the knights replied. There are Lady Detlinde's retainers. As per the report we'd received, Detlinde had at least 10 retainers with her. Perhaps they were more who had yet to be brought out, but the ones currently bound in front of me looked as though they had no idea how they ended up in this predicament. Gags prevented them from speaking out in protest. The most they could do was stare hatefully at the Ahrensbach knights who had captured them. The only one of the bound retainers I recognized was Martina. I must have grown too much for her to immediately recognize me in turn. She had to squint at me for a bit before her eyes widened in surprise. Ah, there we go! Someone recognized you! Anyway, looks like the two groups were staying in separate buildings. Every single one of the nobles taken from the building Ferdinand attacked was from Ahrensbach. My attention strayed to a woman sprawled out next to Detlinde. Her hair was the same deep hue as Georgine's and Sylvester's, and she shared their dark green eyes. She must have been on edge because she was frantically looking all over the place. Soon enough, a red-haired man joined our gathering of prisoners. He seemed unusually arrogant for someone who was bound. His purple eyes were firmly locked on us. Lady Rosemine, these are Lady Alstead and Lord Blasius. Oh, those two. Alstead was Georgine's first daughter and Detlinde's older sister. Blasius was her husband. As I recalled, he and his brother had been demoted to the rank of archnoble in the aftermath of the Civil War when their mother, the second wife, was executed. The building has been subjugated, Ferdinand announced upon his return. How fare things on Dunkelfelder's side? Lorenz sent an ordinance to confirm, and a response arrived almost at once. We have subjugated our building as well. Every hostel of note has been captured. We are currently checking for any hidden doors or passageways. Every hostel of note, Ferdinand repeated. His eyes betrayed surprise as he gazed upon our prisoners, seemingly looking for someone in particular. Gervasia. Is something the matter, I asked? I do not see Gervasia. The Lanznavians here are all so young. I recognize most of them from the envoy's formal greetings, but Gervasio is not among them. Gervasio had set out for Lanznau before Ferdinand was born, meaning he must have been in his 40s by now. I started to look around, and indeed there was nobody that old among our prisoners. It was strange, equally concerning that his retainers would probably be about the same age. Ferdinand removed Alsted's gag and said, "Where is Gervasio?" Alsted didn't answer the question. Instead, she stared up at Ferdinand with all the grace of a startled deer and then screamed, "How are you still alive? And why are Ahrensbach knights pointing their blades at me? To what end have Dunkelfelder's troops been... Eckert had thrust a foot into Alsted's back. She crumbled under the force of the blow, then coughed and sputtered, having been taken entirely by surprise. He glared at her with eyes full of malice and said, "You are in no position to ask questions. Answer him." Alsted recoiled in the face of such unexpected violence. She had been raised an Ahrensbach Archduke candidate and ascended to the rank of Archnoble through marriage. I suspected she had never been exposed to an attack like that before. Only when Eckert grabbed a fistful of her hair and yanked her head up did she tearfully shout, "I do not know! We stay in separate buildings from the Lanznavians. I do not know how Lord Gervasio spends his nights." The woman's shrieks rang out. She was shaking her head desperately enough that I was convinced she was telling the truth. We weren't sure how much the people of Ahrensbach had been told about Lanznau's plans, and we wouldn't get anything from torturing someone who was completely in the dark. I opened my mouth to say that we should stop pressing her, but Ferdinand raised a hand to silence me and stepped forward. You speak like you are a victim in all this, which makes no sense to me. Detlinde was chosen to become the next Ob Ehrensbach. God dang it. Hang on. So why did you die the Foundation in her place? Could you not have used your newly acquired authority to stop her tyranny? And why did you bring the Lanzanavians here to the Royal Academy? You have reduced your duchy's fate to that of a traitor working with foreign elements. Mother ordered me to, and Alsted's face grew paler by the second, but her excuses elicited only a cold sneer from Ferdinand. As the Archduchess, you have registered the Lanzanavians as Ehrensbach nobles, allowed them to use the teleporter to the Lanzanav estate, opened the farthest hall, and foolishly enabled them to obtain staffs. You cannot pretend to be oblivious to the severity of your crimes. Mother is always right, and it was not like I acted alone. A member of the royal family opened the farthest hall to the Lanzanavians. Who? Ferdinand merely frowned, but the knights were quick to voice their outrage. They had captured a former member of Ehrensbach's archducal family for the crime of treason, only to be told that the royal family was in on the ordeal. The Zend had yet to recognize me as a new archduchess, so I could not open the door to the farthest hall. Alsted continued. I requested the assistance of the sovereign knight commander, who managed to secure us help for the royal family. Even the royals are cooperating with Lanzanav. The heck is going on here? That's what I want to know. Who is it? Is it Hildebrand? Is it Anastasia? Is it, Sigiswald. I think it's what his name is. Anyway, that's the end of part 1. We're going to have to wait until the book club is out for the next one. But yeah, I've whetted your appetites on this. I hope you guys enjoy, and I'll see you on the next one.